The Ukrainian army could be fighting a losing battle in Luhansk. They're committing reserves to the front line. Russian firepower is destroying towns and killing Ukrainian soldiers. One unit went into the line with 240 men and came out with 100 of them killed, wounded, and captured. Bakhmut is a town getting slowly eaten by the war. This week it's around 3 miles from the Russians, well within range. Next week it might be much closer. Civilians with somewhere to go have left. In the ruins in Donbas, the victory in Kiev in March, the euphoria, glory, and sacrifice feel distant. Where's the ceasefire, says Dmitry, even if it costs land?
What could it change for me? The main thing is to stay alive. This is just the beginning. Everything is still to come. If we survive, we'll see how it goes.
At a safe distance from the front line, civilians were brought to a railway platform for evacuation. Most were too weak and too old to leave before the war swallowed them, and now they're wounded. Lida was rescued from ruined Severodonetsk, almost surrounded by the Russians. Thousands of Ukrainian civilians are still there. The train's been transformed into an ambulance and intensive care unit by MSF, Doctors Without Borders. The intensity of the fighting means the train is running at close to full capacity. The medics work continuous back-to-back trips. Relative safety in Lviv is 20 hours down the track. It's an escape capsule from a war that's so hard to predict that the medical teams only know who's coming in the last hours before they leave. Sometimes they're wounded the same morning. Mikhailo from Bakhmut was on the train 6 hours after he was hurt in an airstrike.
I saw our soldiers standing nearby and crawled towards them. Then I realized my strength was leaving me and I wouldn't be able to crawl. I got up and started screaming.
Even when families survived with them, the lives they led are smashed.
My husband and I have lived together for 51 years in peace and harmony, and now it ends so badly. I guess we're running out of time.
Yasser Kamaledin organizes the train. Evacuating the wounded is vital for the Ukrainians as the war in the east intensifies.
The hospitals closer to the front line are overwhelmed, are receiving continuously big numbers of patients beyond their capacity to cope. So it's very important for us and for the Ministry of Health here in Ukraine to make sure that these hospitals are always ready to receive more patients, especially war wounded.
This war is much more organized now than it was back in February when it started. Not just medical evacuation, though what they're doing on this train is really remarkable, but also where the decisions are made. The generals, the presidents, you get the feeling that they've settled in for a long, hard, attritional struggle. The Ukrainians don't talk much about their own casualties, but the graveyards in the east are filling up, and their president says up to 100 soldiers a day could be dying in Donbas. He says only diplomacy can end the war. His allies, led by the US and UK, want to weaken Putin's Russia permanently. Their critics say they'll fight to the last Ukrainian.
The sound of Severodonetsk being pounded and broken by bombs never stops. Ukrainian troops, vastly outnumbered here, can see the Russians way in. And underneath all these explosions, there are civilians still trying to survive. One of the main bridges linking the city to the rest of the Donbas has been bombed. It's now impassable. So the only way people can now leave and aid can get in is on this last usable bridge, which has been hit several times already. This is the city's remaining lifeline, and the Ukrainians are only just holding on to it. Inside, there is a humanitarian disaster rapidly unfolding, with thousands of people still here. This is a city which Russia would have banked on being pro-Kremlin, with strong links and often with relatives living there. They are evacuees, but they are fleeing in the face of this terrible onslaught.
It's hell. You know, it's hell first, every day. Second, a lot of death. Third, problems.
The Seoul Working Hospital is now surrounded by Russian troops, so the only chance for the injured is to be evacuated, and this is one of the very few evacuation trips.
Now it seems like the front is all around the city. It's practically surrounded. There are tanks. There are we can see trucks from the army being deployed around the city. So it seems very clear that, to me, it's about to fall.
Are you glad to be going?
Yes and no. I don't know.
Feeling sad about leaving as well? But time is running out if they're to leave. And these volunteers hope to be back later to help more flee. A handful are delivering water, strapping bottles on the back of their bikes to take to those trapped in their homes.
Моя страна гибнет. Очень тяжело. Жалко. Плохо, тяжело. Переживаю.
He was a musician once. Now his world is filled with the sounds of war. A small moment to collect himself.
Ничего.
But we will win, he tells us. Everything will be okay. Thank you, he says, and kisses my hand. There's work to do. Valeri's another. It's far away, he reassures us about the bombing. The strength of these people continues to astonish.
He doesn't even flinch.
We're used to it, he says. It's been 3 months. Valery and his wife Nila won't leave. They've notched up 135 years between them, and they're now enduring bombs which are landing every few minutes. It is unrelenting and goes on and on as he weaves his way back through his community and takes us to his home, where he and his neighbours have been sheltering and where he's been ferrying food and water to, where there seems to be still a fair amount of people living. His neighbours tell us how hard it is to get even water. Yelena's saying she has to carry 2 or 3 bottles by hand. Everyone begins to panic at what sounds like cluster bombs landing far too close by. We head for the doorway to shelter. Open the basement, Valery shouts. Come, come, he says, I'm used to it. Everyone piles inside, waiting for yet more incoming bombs. Every day is like this, Yelena tells us. It was quiet for just 10 minutes. Every day it's back and forth like this, flying over our heads. Seconds later, Valery is punched by a neighbour. He's angry at Valery for bringing foreign journalists here. Many blame us for prompting the bombings.
Was he pushed?
This war has set pensioner against pensioner and forced neighbours to turn on each other. Please tell the world what's happening in Donbas, she says.
And show, please, how it is.
I'm trying not to cry, she says. I'm trying to keep myself calm, but you need to tell them what the situation is. Well, This is going on all the time. It's unbelievable that there are so many people who are still living and having to put up with this. They're right in the middle of it. At the aid hub, more injured have been brought in, and one woman has got a very nasty head wound.
There's no gunshot wound, it's just shrapnel. The worst injuries to her head, but obviously she just needs to get evacuated for that.
It turns out Sky News colleague Nick Davenport is the most qualified medic here, probably in the whole of the city. There's a police-trained first aider too, who asked not to be identified. There are 2 badly wounded here, but most certainly not the only ones in dire need of medical help in the city. Emma is back with her evac team, but her vehicle has broken down, so she's urgently trying to find replacements.
We only have 2 passenger vehicles. So
somehow the aid hub manager finds a way out for them. This is going to be a difficult and dangerous journey for them, but at least they have hope. There's very little of that going around this city right now as the Russian troops close in. Alex Crawford, Sky News, in Severodonetsk in eastern Ukraine.